They blew out of the Windy City with a bold new sound.
We're not doing bop, bop, ba-da, bop, bop, bop. We're dancing with the vocal.
Everything that they did was fresh and exciting.
By the early 70s, Chicago was world famous, but their names and faces stayed hidden behind a logo.
You think of Chicago, you think of that logo.
I'm so happy. Behind the trademark were 7 hard-living young men who were all too human.
The fuel of cocaine became really important on the road.
We had the drug plane, and we had the meditation plane.
Typical rock and roll.
For their volatile lead guitarist, the struggle with stardom was fatal.
His state of mind mixed, unfortunately, with his love for firearms.
There were a lot of rumors that Terry was playing Russian roulette.
He was aiming the gun at his own head.
The last words that came out of his mouth were, "It's not loaded."
When Terry was no longer with us, we were no longer Chicago.
As time goes on.
In time, the hits died out.
A label said, man, if you get rid of the horn section, we'll sign you.
But Chicago found a way to survive.
They needed to be reminded of their greatness.
The 80s brought Chicago a second wave of soft rock success, a success that some called a sellout.
I would rather fail with an album full of music that we really, really want to do than have a mega hit of crap.
Chicago was a democratic machine until one band member wound up with all the clout.
He was ready to go, wanted to be a star.
And once that happens, you both move on. It's like a divorce.
To have somebody leave and still be able to go on is a testament to how deep the band is.
We can make it happen, yeah.
Now, for the first time on TV, in their own words, the story of the men behind the most famous logo in rock and roll, Chicago, behind the music.
Yeah, we can make it happen, we can make it happen.
Come on, buddy.
Step on back.
Chicago, Illinois is a town known for hard work, and for more than 3 decades, the band that bears its name has been one of the hardest working groups in pop music.
But I want to feel forever.
Chicago has taken its signature brass-based sound on the road every year for the past 33 years.
I love it when you talk dirty.
Senile.
Times I remember. Since the first time Chicago's horns were heard on the radio in 1969, they've sold over 120 million albums, and they've charted 20 top 10 singles.
Does anybody really know what time it is?
Chicago's labors have been honored with Grammy Awards and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Their hometown even named a street after them.
It's the American dream when you think about it.
But if Chicago has lived a dream, they've also survived a nightmare.
It hasn't been all happy stuff. You know, it's been far more profound and deeper and darker.
So hard to be.
Terry Kath, lead singer in the rock group Chicago, kills himself with a gun he didn't think was loaded.
In one fatal moment, they lost their heart and soul.
It hit us so deep that we thought, well, maybe this is the way it's supposed to end.
I could never talk about this for, it's been, how many years since he died?
Looking back a few short years.
But through highs and lows, year in and year out, Chicago has never stopped playing their unique catalog of classic songs.
I turn on a Chicago album, and I don't care how many times I've heard it, I hear it fresh and new each time.
I think we have survived on music, solely music.
Oh, at the beginning. Oh, not just a star. Yeah.
The band's beginnings can be traced back to the campus of Chicago's DePaul University and music major Walt Parazaider.
I was pursuing a classical degree, but I enjoyed a schizoid existence playing rock and roll and, whatever band I could get in.
Walt was playing top 40 hits in a band with guitarist Terry Kath and drummer Danny Seraphine. Then in February of 1967, Walt recruited two DePaul University classmates, trumpet player Lee Loughnane and trombonist Jimmy Pankow.
He apparently had this dream about starting a rock and roll group with a horn section.
But a rock and roll band with horns that were an integral part of the music.
On February 15th, the new band met at Walt's apartment. The last to arrive was keyboard player Robert Lamm, a music major from Chicago's Roosevelt University.
It just sounded really good, and it grooved really nicely.
It felt great that night, and we decided that we were going to take it as far as we could.
They called themselves The Big Thing, and their sound was something new, a rock group whose horn section formed the heart of the band, and whose rock and roll soul was guitarist Terry Kath.
Hey there, everybody!
Terry was incredibly soulful.
He had a Ray Charles quality to his voice, and he sang with such passion.
Everybody that works a 40-hour week just for some bread.
That first night together, the six young men made a pact.
The only way anybody would ever leave the band is if they quit or they died. And, they would never be fired.
With some members still in college, The Big Thing worked weekends on the Midwest club circuit, playing the radio hits of the time. They also added original songs to their playlist.
Sing me to a king, oh yeah!
The club owners didn't like that at all.
I ain't paying you guys to be artsy-fartsy. I'm paying you to be a show band. Give me a show or get the hell out.
Sock 'em in the guts, yeah, yeah, yeah!
By August of '67, Walt was looking to break out of the clubs.
Can't stand it no more!
He called up another college buddy who'd become a producer for CBS Records in Los Angeles. Jimmy Guercio flew back to Chicago to catch The Big Thing.
They were a powerful band. I thought they were great.
By then, The Big Thing had developed a trademark sound.
Listen!
I heard our horn section as another lead voice. We're doing da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. We're dancing with the vocal.
I said all you got to do is listen.
But dance as they might, the band's singers could not keep up with the horn section.
We needed a tenor voice because both Robert and Terry had more baritone voices, and they couldn't really get up to the high notes up there. And Cetera, that's where he sings.
The voice they needed belonged to a local bass player named Peter Cetera. In December of '67, Cetera joined The Big Thing, and big things were about to happen.
It was really the final piece of the puzzle that really, shaped Chicago, in a sense of the sound.
There was three really fine singers. You got the three horn players and a really great rhythm section. Bam, there was the whole band.
Producer Jimmy Guercio came on board as their manager. Guercio renamed the band Chicago Transit Authority, bankrolled them with his own money, and brought them to Los Angeles in the summer of '68. Guercio booked the band in local clubs, where they won the praise of a very special fan.
I felt somebody tap me on the back, and I turned around. It's Jimi Hendrix staring me in the face. And he says, I gotta tell you, your guitar player is way better than me. He says, the horns are like one set of lungs. I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, somebody slipped me acid.
By the end of the year, their popularity was growing, and Guercio got then CBS label chief Clive Davis to listen to his CTA demo.
I loved what Jimmy had played for me, and indeed, I did make a deal with Jimmy Guercio for Chicago.
In January of '69, CTA began work on their first album for CBS.
And I said, we're going to do this record in 2 weeks. They said, 2, By this time, it was panic set in.
We were petrified.
10 days later, CTA emerged from the studio with enough material for a double album.
I said, well, it's the best we can do. And if it doesn't work, I'll live with it.
Chicago Transit Authority was released in April of '69. The album was a groundbreaking fusion of jazz and rock, but its first singles, Beginnings, and Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is, went nowhere. That December, Guercio booked the group on a 2-week European tour. Across the water, a surprise was waiting.
We sold over 1 million units of that first album in France.
We went to Europe and we were gods.
Coming up, Chicago hits it big back home.
Here's a song that's zooming up the charts, destined for #1.
And later, the sudden death of Terry Kath.
He had a premonition that he was going to die young. Maybe that's why he lived his life so fast.
When Behind the Music continues. On their debut album, Chicago Transit Authority didn't sound like any other rock and roll band on the radio. In just 2 years, their dream of a horn-centered rock group had become a full-blown reality.
They've actually interspersed horns with rock and roll, and that was not commonplace at that point.
I'd like to know, can you tell me, please don't tell me.
At first, CTA's unique sound was a hard sell.
We tried releasing singles off the first album, and AM radio would not play them.
With Chicago, it took a long time because it was not easily identifiable what it was.
With the release of CTA's second album in January of 1970, producer and manager Jimmy Guercio gave the band a marketing makeover. They would now be called simply Chicago. There would be no photos of the 7 faces in the band on Chicago's album covers. The group would come to be identified by a logo.
Listen, in a lot of respects, the group might resent me for it, but I wanted to market it in a certain way.
Well, we used to bitch and moan because we wanted our mugs on the front albums like everyone else, but it was really for the best.
Because we wanted it to be the group and not try to single in on any individuals.
We're a democracy, you know, we do what's best for the whole.
25 or 6 to 4.
Chicago had a new look, but their sound still met with resistance. Their second album got little radio play, and concerned CBS record executives turned to Guercio.
Give me something to go to radio. All these tracks are 7-8 minutes, and we edited a number of these records. And I think Clive got very involved.
We absolutely worked on the edits to shape the songs so that they could fit into the song length of the time.
Guercio and Davis made Chicago's songs shorter and more radio-friendly.
We were all pretty pissed off about it because, oh, how dare they cut up our music? You know, we were artists.
They were highly critical of the butchering of their material. Yeah, I agreed with them, actually. But it was a compromise to be on the radio.
Make Me Smile was the first song that they edited, and it turned out to be Chicago's first hit in 1970.
I was just cruising down Santa Monica Boulevard and turned on the radio. Here's a song that's zooming up the charts, destined for #1. A new song by a new group called Chicago. Make Me Smile.
Children play in the park, they don't know.
Make Me Smile burst into the top 10 and opened the commercial floodgates for Chicago.
I just wanna be free.
In the winter of '71, Chicago 3 became the #2 album in the nation, and all of Chicago's first 3 albums were on the charts. Over the next 4 years, Chicago would release 5 albums that would hit #1 on the Billboard charts.
Saturday in the park, I think it was the 4th of July.
It's like a tidal wave, a tsunami that just kept peaking and peaking and peaking.
I love you.
It was almost like we could fart on record and it was going to be a #1 hit.
For a while there, it was just a slam dunk. There was going to be hit after hit. It was amazing.
But for the 7 serious musicians in the band, chart success came with a price.
I noticed that, and Terry Kath also noticed that the music that we were recording was not quite as experimental as previous albums had been.
I'm not sure that Terry was very happy with the direction because it became this machine.
I mean, it was calculated that we were going to stop being a band that played arrangements and become more of song-oriented.
I was uncomfortable with it because I didn't want to just do that.
By the summer of '76, Chicago had been touring for nearly a decade, and their relentless concert schedule was taking a toll.
Terry told me once, he said, Jim, we played 252 one-nighters in 1 year.
There were tours where he'd come back and say, I've had it. You know, I've had it. I can't do this anymore, you know. But of course he'd go back.
I felt that this music had an impact on the youth of the world and could break down barriers.
Guercio had a global view, and I can't say he was totally wrong, but the way he was going about it was just really destructive.
More destructive was the band's escalating use of drugs.
Different times in the band, different people really got out of whack.
We partied a lot, and it affected our work schedule. I think it started to bother Guercio.
It became more and more difficult for me to get the quality writing I needed, the performances I needed vocally.
I think cocaine affected me, and not just the cocaine itself, the overdoing of the cocaine, where I would go up on stage and I'd be like this, and be a live wire, and I mean, it's impossible to play.
The fuel of cocaine became really important on the road.
It was getting more and more unpleasant for me.
But while Guercio was having trouble with the band was also having trouble with Guercio.
Came to a point that we wanted to be a little more hands-on and grow a little bit and learn a little bit more.
It was financial too, I mean, in the sense that we wanted a bigger cut of the pie.
Danny kind of whipped all of us up into a frenzy about, you know, he's just totally screwing us, and we need to renegotiate.
Guercio agreed to give the band a larger share of royalties, but their relationship was already beyond repair.
If I'm going up the hill, I need loyalty.
In October of '77, the band confronted their longtime mentor.
It was a band decision, but it came down that we sat down in a room, you know, and just said, it's just not working.
I can't say I thought it was a good thing, but it seemed to be what everybody wanted to do.
There was friction, and there was some animosity, and there was lawyers, you know, typical rock and roll, you know.
After 10 years, 11 top 10 singles, and 5 #1 albums, Chicago parted with Jimmy Guercio.
We're just gonna not have any acrimony here. Where's the management contract? And I tore it up. Where's the recording contract? And I tore it up.
If it wasn't for Jimmy Guercio, I truly believe that there would never have been Chicago.
The split with Guercio would mark the end of Chicago's golden era of success. Within 4 months, tragedy would threaten to destroy them. Coming up, Chicago loses its soul.
He did have an edge, and he did take everything to the wall. He did have a love for guns.
And later, Chicago loses its voice.
Something happens that just doesn't make it all right anymore, and you get a divorce.
When Behind the Music continues.
Music created a lot of success. And so the tragedy to me is kind of what you do with that success.
When Chicago broke with their longtime manager and producer Jimmy Guercio in October of 1977, the band was at the height of its popularity.
Waiting for the break of day.
After playing together for 10 years, they now enjoyed all the privileges and pitfalls of rock and roll superstardom.
A lot of success, a lot of time, a lot of traveling, a lot of women around in pursuit.
We had women scaling buildings, and the fire department, you know, coming and taking them off a building.
There seemed to be a mode of behavior that was created to fit some sort of image that we had of the way that we thought we should act because we were rock stars.
We go into places we don't even want to meet chicks half the time. The chicks are like, oh. You know, all they want is a free ride. You know, that's all a groupie is.
We're all immortal. You know, couldn't do anything wrong. We're invincible.
But not everyone was enjoying the ride.
You'd better end soon, my friend. Yeah.
Of all the people in the band, Terry had the hardest time with success. It messed with him the most, I think.
He was torn between wanting to be a good man, wanting to be a great musician, and fame. Fame didn't matter to him.
In a group known for its horns, it was Terry Kath's hard-edged guitar and soulful vocals that kept the band rooted in rock and roll.
I've never played with a guitar player as good as Terry.
Hendrix told me, he says, I'm pretty good, man, but this cat blows me away.
Besides being just a brilliant guitarist, he was a soulful, creative, anti-establishment, anti-fashion, anti-politically correct guy.
There was a down from the bootstraps, gutsy, soulful quality to him that's what he was.
He was the soul of the band. And there was something about him on the road when things were tense or things were falling apart where he would just step in and just pull it together.
According to his wife, contradictions seemed to define Terry Kath.
He was romantic, he was generous, but he did have an edge. He did have a love for guns. Where that came from, I have no idea, but we had tons of guns. He did live his life fast, life in the fast lane.
He was completely self-destructive, you know. He was my hero.
By that time, we had Michelle, our daughter, and we had just bought a house in Malibu, and things had gotten out of control in his life with the band and with touring, and he was just dying inside.
Terry was getting out of hand. He was carrying guns around all the time, and he was high. He was using way too much drugs.
He had a premonition that he was going to die young. He told me that when I first met him. Maybe that's why he lived his life so fast.
In January of 1978, while the band took a break from touring, Kath paid a visit to Danny Seraphine.
I mean, he told me, he said, I'm worried about myself. I'm doing too much drugs. I got to do something about this. I got to stop. And he wanted to. But I think he took one last bender and, you know, tragedy struck.
On January 23, 1978, Chicago roadie Donnie Johnson threw a party at his San Fernando Valley home. When the party broke up, Terry Kath stayed.
Terry was not happy at that time, and Terry had been up for long periods of time.
There were a lot of rumors that Terry was playing Russian roulette.
Donnie said he had a 9mm automatic that he was cleaning. His theory is that Terry forgot that he had a round chambered.
And he took the clip out, and he didn't clear the chamber. He took the clip out and pulled the trigger, and when you have the clip out, the gun doesn't fire, you know? Put it back in.
The last words that came out of his mouth were, "It's not loaded, don't worry, it's not loaded."
And the gun went off, and Donnie said he just kind of laid his head back on the back of the chair, and he was gone.
Los Angeles police detectives went to Terry's Malibu home to deliver the grim news to his wife Camelia and 2-year-old daughter Michelle.
The walk from that door, which was out on Pacific Coast Highway, to the front door of the house I do remember that walk for the rest of my life. and it was in slow motion. And I feel like it took forever to get to that door, because there's a part of me that was aware that something had happened.
When the phone rang that night when I got the news, the gypsy blood in me, I didn't want to answer the phone. There was just a bad ring to that phone.
When I got the call that Terry had shot himself and was dead, I said, I don't believe you. So I went to the house. I saw Terry. He was like in the couch, you know, his head laid back, and I sat next to him. And, you know, I told him that, you know, I hope that he's found peace. And it broke my heart.
It's all been cried about before.
I had seen him less than 8 hours before I got the call. The first thing I did is I went up to the den in the house and looked at his footprints in the carpet. He had just been there in that room.
Last night in Los Angeles, Terry Kath put what he thought was an empty pistol to his head. The rock music star from Chicago pulled the trigger. He was killed instantly.
Terry Kath was laid to rest on January 28, 1978. He was 31 years old.
Looking back a few short years.
I had been asked to eulogize at the service. I said yes, but, you know, I had to get loaded for that one.
That was the first time I had seen him at the funeral, and that's when I realized that he wasn't really there anymore.
I kind of have a picture of the memorial, but I don't really know what was going on in my head. I was just trying to get through it.
I directly blame drugs for Terry's death, you know. And, you know, sure, guns, but heading up and high and been up all night. And he was on a destructive path, and he knew it.
Speculation about the nature of Terry Kath's death quickly spread through the press and music community, including rumors of suicide.
Terry had just a hunger for life. For him to take his life, it just wasn't him.
Terry died of an accidental gunshot wound. I know that it was not intentionally inflicted.
He didn't commit suicide. It was a senseless accident.
Kath's sudden death cast a pall over Chicago's plans for the future.
The managers, the agents, the attorneys, the record company, public relations people, all said, you guys gotta stay together. And what else are they gonna say?
I remember saying to somebody, you know, if it was me, I would want the band to go on.
We still enjoyed playing together, and we were still successful and enjoyed what we were doing. We got to keep going.
And Terry, I am convinced he's looking down. His being is smiling down on this entity because we carried the flag.
I do think of Terry virtually every day because, especially out on the road, I sing his song. I sing Color My World.
As time goes on, I realize.
So when I'm singing it, I hear his voice. I don't hear my voice.
To me.
I feel lucky because he's very much in my life still. Every day, Terry's in my life. He's in my life through my daughter.
Since I was so young, when my father died, about 2 years old, I got to know my father through all the stories I heard from my mom. It's really funny because sometimes I'll be someplace, all of a sudden, there will be a song with my dad singing. It'll be at a time when I was thinking about it, and it was almost like, okay, I'm here, you know, I'm here for you. That's the way I know that he's around me, is through his songs, through his music.
Someone's personality is so alive, and they have such a hunger for life, and they live the way he lived. They don't die.
Coming up, the Chicago hit machine breaks down.
A label said, man, if you get rid of the horn section, we'll sign you. It's like telling Elton John to get rid of the piano.
And later, when opportunity knocks, one band member walks out the door.
Hey, I wonder if I could kind of go out there on my own.
When Behind the Music continues.
I never think of it at all.
I think it started taking on a different sound after Terry died, because that was when we realized that a piece of the magic was gone.
After the sudden, shocking death of their lead guitarist, Terry Kath, the 6 surviving members of Chicago decided to press on. In the spring of 1978, they faced the difficult task of replacing the rock and roll soul.
There wouldn't be anybody like Terry, but yet we were trying to find somebody like Terry.
As heartbreaking it was to parade guitar players in and out. You know, it was part of the whole closure process.
All the empty yesterdays have disappeared.
In the fall of '78, 8 months after Kath's death, a new chapter in the Chicago story began with the release of the band's 12th album. The sales numbers for Hot Streets were disappointing, and there were no top 10 singles. By the end of 1980, when Chicago 14 sold less than 1 million copies, their all-time low, the band was clearly in a slump.
All that success that had happened, all of a sudden we hit the wall. All of a sudden, nothing could go right.
My contention is that when Terry was no longer with us, that we were no longer Chicago.
Faced with lackluster sales, Columbia Records dropped Chicago from the label.
All of a sudden, I started thinking, do we fit in?
They could not get a song played on the air.
Some record executives still had an interest in Chicago, but only if changes were made.
A label said, man, if you get rid of the horn section, we'll sign you. It's like telling Elton John to get rid of the piano.
The band kept its horns, but did make one change, as Grammy-winning songwriter Bill Champlin joined the group. Vocally, Champlin was the perfect complement to lead singer Peter Cetera.
I'm addicted to you, babe. You're a heart having to break.
It was pretty instant that once Peter and I hit the microphone, we kind of went, whoa, this is pretty cool.
Chicago went into the studio to record a new album in the summer of 1981. They had no label, but they had a new producer named David Foster.
I'm sitting there, and they're playing. And it's unbelievable except for one thing. And the one thing that was wrong was that the songs weren't good. And I said, you know what, guys, I'm sorry, but there's nothing here that's equal to what I know and love about Chicago.
Working with David was kind of a good shot in the arm.
We were sinking fast, both commercially, emotionally. You know, Peter, I know he was having thoughts of leaving the band. Robert was having a real rough time, you know, creatively.
Bobby Lamm was really going through some tough stuff when I first came to the group. And I think that he, more than anybody, probably resented me being there because I was a keyboard player too.
At first I resented it. I didn't think we needed it. But I think history has shown us we did need David Foster to come in and kick us in the ass.
They needed to be reminded of their greatness and how great they could be again.
Working with Foster did just that. In June of '82, Chicago 16 vaulted the band back into the top 10 for the first time in 6 years. Then in the spring of '84, the band followed up with their greatest commercial success. Produced by Foster, Chicago 17 sold more than 6 million copies.
You're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration.
It was the comeback, and I just remember my wife saying, now that this is happening, enjoy every minute.
It was like dying, you know, and being dead for a minute or two, and coming back, you know, you appreciate life a lot more.
But there was a downside to Chicago's newfound success.
Radio was expecting Chicago just to keep pumping out those ballads because they were doing it so well.
It's really a shocking thing to have been once considered avant-garde almost, and now be kind of dismissed as kind of wimpy.
But being pigeonholed as soft rockers wasn't the only problem.
When MTV came into existence, we started doing videos along with everybody else. So we made Peter Cetera the star because he sing all the tunes.
Cetera was ready to go. Lost weight, was looking good.
Since its earliest days, Chicago had been the faceless band behind the logo. Now, with the spotlight squarely on Peter Cetera, dynamics within the group began to change.
Peter had pretty much started calling the shots in a sense, and you know, it was hard for guys to accept that.
He was sort of breaking away from the thing that was that democracy we had, or the collective whole. That's when I said, this isn't a good thing.
Anybody that's in a group structure sooner or later wants to say, hey, I wonder if I could kind of go out there on my own.
In May of '85, Peter Cetera walked away from Chicago for a career as a solo artist. He left behind 18 years of music and friendship.
We spent a lot of years together, and we spent most of that time laughing.
Cetera didn't look back. To this day, he rarely talks publicly about his time with Chicago, and he declined Behind the Music's request for an interview. He also denied this program use of the songs he wrote for Chicago.
It's like a divorce, you know, you go through the good times and you have some of the bad times and you get a divorce, and once that happens, you both move on.
Chicago replaced Cetera with singer-songwriter Jason Scheff, and in the fall of '86, they released their 18th album.
Will You Still Love Me went to #3 pop, #1 AC, and that's when I finally started feeling like, okay, you're in the band.
A lot of people had written Chicago off when Peter left, but it was proven at that time that Chicago is stronger than any individual member.
But that theory would once more be put to the test. As the band prepared to record Chicago 21 in the fall of '89, drummer Danny Seraphine received a phone call from Chicago's manager, Howard Kaufman.
Well, Danny and I don't want you to overreact, but the band has decided they want to use a session drummer on the next record.
Over the years, Seraphine's increasing interest in the business side of the band had created tension between Danny and some of his bandmates.
Danny wanted to have more control over the band in a political manner, and what we wanted him to do was be our drummer.
I think what happened was during the drug era, because I was straight, management knew they could talk to me, so I became kind of the unspoken leader. They didn't like a drummer having this much control.
I don't think he was paying attention to what he should have been paying attention to, which was playing.
Seraphine played live with the band a few more times, but hard feelings led to the inevitable. And in May of '90, Danny got another call from Chicago's manager.
Howard saying, look, Danny, they just got a call from the band, they had a meeting, and they voted you out of the band. You just don't treat somebody that you've been with 23 years like a brother like that. You just don't do that.
It was really hard, but it was either going to pull the band apart if he stayed, and I think by asking him to leave was the only way the band could stay together.
Coming up, Chicago makes a musical stand, but pays a price.
Not only did they not like it, they hated it.
When Behind the Music continues. As Chicago entered its third decade of music making, 3 of the band's 7 founding members were no longer with the group. Each departure had been wrenching in its own way, but with each loss, the remaining members of Chicago pulled together and carried on.
To have somebody leave and still be able to go on is a testament to how deep the band is.
But as the '80s became the '90s, years of soft rock success had painted the band into an artistic corner.
That was Chicago's niche, the power ballad.
After a hit in a certain genre, all your what I call pilot fish, people around you, are going to tell you, do that again.
By the spring of 1993, a restless Chicago entered the recording studio on a mission.
We went into the studio and we broke some new ground for us.
The project, called Stone of Sisyphus, captured the sound of Chicago striving to redefine itself. When Warner label executives heard the album, they weren't happy.
Not only did they not like it, they hated it.
They said that this is an unreleasable album, and they weren't going to put it out.
They said, you know, you need to go back in the studio and record some ballads or something, you know. I give us credit in that we just said, A, we'd rather not go back in the studio, and B, we'd rather not be with a company that is thinking that way. I would rather fail with an album full of music that we really, really want to do than have a mega hit of crap.
Heading into the new millennium, Chicago has regained some musical momentum. Today, the band's lineup is still anchored by the 4 remaining founding members: Walt Parazaider, James Pankow, Lee Loughnane, and Robert Lamm. The others, Bill Champlin, Jason Scheff, drummer Tris Imboden, and guitarist Keith Howland, will always be the new guys.
I've almost been with the band for 6 years now. And, I mean, it's funny that Chicago fans still think of Bill as a new guy.
I'm a 20-year-old rookie.
Band members may be old or new, but Chicago's hit songs are timeless.
You know, Saturday in the park again. But you look out there, man, and these people are going, yeah, Saturday in the park!
I think we're better entertainers, and we're better performers and better players now. And stop doing the drugs and booze, or, you know, we'd probably almost definitely either be out of the business and possibly dead as well.
The year 2000 marked Chicago's 33rd year of rock and roll, and there's no end in sight.
There's a sense that there's this one great album that everybody is just gonna get, a masterpiece. I think that keeps us going.
We still enjoy playing. I mean, that's the basic ingredient.
And we've endured largely because we respect each other as people as much as musicians.
And thank God that we throw a party and people come to the shows.
And as long as they keep showing up, man, we're gonna keep throwing down, because that's our mission, that's our purpose.
We did a lot of living and accomplished a lot, and it went by like that.
We can make it happen. It's only the beginning, but I want to feel forever. Yeah. Only the beginning. It's only just a start.
Next week, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Giselle host the 2000 VH1 Vogue Fashion Awards with live performances by Lenny Kravitz, Destiny's Child, Macy Gray, and Kid Rock. Plus, new episodes of your favorite shows, including the premiere of Sinead O'Connor Behind the Music. And one more thing, Fashion Awards Friday night. All new, all next week, only on VH1.